Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited to be bringing another 2025 NBA mock draft as the college seasons and international seasons for some of these draft prospects have carried on. We have learned so much more about the 2025 NBA draft class. I've been spending so much time watching college basketball games, watching film for the games that I miss, and really reviewing the tape for hundreds of prospects. I'm watching so many different players right now, and you'll see that in this video. There has been a lot of movement, a lot of shifting from my last mock draft, which was recorded just about a month ago. So there's been a ton of changes. We've learned a lot about these prospects since then. As more film, as more games have been played, there's a lot to learn and a lot to gain knowledge-wise on these prospects. So I hope you guys do enjoy the video. If you do, leave a like, subscribe, and let's jump into that video preview here really quickly. The draft order is based on Friday, December 13th. So what I do for these mock drafts, pick the order. This is based on standings, and then I spend the entire weekend really thinking through which team would maybe look at which prospects. There are so many hours that go into specifically these mock drafts, which is why, especially in the beginning of the season, there is so much more time in between the mock drafts, giving me more time to evaluate prospects, more time to watch film, and then really think about destinations that make sense while I'm also watching NBA games. A reminder too that yes, we are in December still. The order, the teams might change, shift positions a bit. We also have an NBA draft lottery that will shake things up. So don't get too bent out of shape if your team isn't picking where you'd want them to be. Things are likely to change as the season progresses. And I really hope you guys just flat out do enjoy the video. What I want you to do right now, spend a second, go down in the comment section and comment who your favorite 2025 NBA draft prospect is. It doesn't have to be who you think is the best, just who is your favorite to watch play basketball. That's the thing about this. We should enjoy the draft cycle, specifically spending time watching these high-level athletes play basketball because it's just such an enjoyable thing. My favorite thing to do on the planet is watch basketball, and I really hope you guys are just flat out enjoying the pure basketball that we're getting to see night in, night out, both in the NBA and in college basketball international play as well. There's just so much good basketball to enjoy right now. So comment your favorite player or prospect down below in the comment section. Jumping into pick number 1, the Washington Wizards, who had a very lengthy losing streak for the better half of the past month or so. Now, they did break that losing streak, but they have been very bad. And I think that's something that was pretty predictable looking at their roster. Not only are they pretty absent of top-end talent and, 1A, 2A, even a 3A type player, they're also extremely young, playing a lot of minutes for guys like Keyshawn George, Bub Carrington, Alex Sarr. Obviously, they do have some veterans like Malcolm Brogdon, Jonas Valanciunas mixed in, Kyle Kuzma, Jordan Poole are still doing their things as well. But the Wizards are not a winning team, but I do think they have a winning foundation that, yes, it will take a few years to establish. But going into this mock draft, earlier in this cycle, the way too early mock, my last mock draft, I had a pretty firm confidence that Cooper Flagg is flat out the number 1 overall pick. I have to say, as we've gained more information, as Rutgers continues to play, as Duke continues to play, this isn't a non-discussion for the first overall pick like I thought it was about a month or 2 months ago. And that is a testament to a few of the other players in this draft class, specifically Dylan Harper from Rutgers. So, first overall, Washington has a real decision to make here between those two prospects. Would they go with Cooper Flagg out of Duke? And remember, maybe a little bit of a home tie here too, given the fact he's from Maine, obviously a Northeast boy at heart. But then you also have Dylan Harper, who's playing his college basketball in New Jersey right now. So he's also in the Northeast. Does that weigh on Washington either direction? I don't really think it will. Ultimately, what I think Washington will do here in this situation is choose a prospect based on their desired team identity. If you look at some of their recent picks, specifically Bilal Coulibaly in the 2023 NBA draft class and Alex Sarr second overall in the 2024 NBA draft class, what Washington is clearly prioritizing is defensive flexibility, versatility. They want to build an elite team defense, and they have an ability to continue doing that here. First overall, I have the Washington Wizards selecting forward Cooper Flagg from Duke, and I think specifically with his fit next to Alex Sarr, the Wizards could have the most unique front court defensively in the entire NBA when it comes to switchability, versatility, rim protection. With Washington putting Cooper Flagg alongside Alex Sarr, they could afford to really aggressively blitz ball screens. They could extend Alex Sarr out onto the perimeter, something he's already naturally very good at. One of the things I love the most out of him during his time with the Perth Wildcats and even prior to that. The athleticism, mobility that Alex Sarr possesses as a 7-footer can really be on full display when you draft someone like Cooper Flagg, who I have deemed to be the perimeter version of Anthony Davis, a prospect who can impact the game in a wide number of ways. You can use him on the basketball a bit, something we've seen throughout Anthony Davis's career, pushing the ball up in transition, handling the basketball a little bit out in the perimeter. Now, Cooper Flagg isn't quite as big as Anthony Davis. He's not going to protect the rim quite as well as Anthony Davis, but I think he has more wing or more guard skills than Anthony Davis, specifically when you look at his shot diet. He's, expanded his game out to the perimeter at an earlier age than we saw from Anthony Davis. And remember, Cooper Flagg's just going to be 18 years old on draft night. So this is a prospect not only right now playing a year early in college basketball, but shining a year early in college basketball, still playing really, really well. Duke has really leaned on him. His usage rate is through the roof right now, and I think when you adjust him to an NBA role, we're going to see that usage rate just tick down maybe just a little bit. I think his recent years at Montverde Academy and then now also at Duke have been good expansion opportunities for his game offensively, giving him opportunities to handle the ball more, create for himself off the dribble, create for others. And those are things Washington will tap into throughout his early career in the NBA, but it's not going to be the primary skill set that he brings. The defensive versatility is what's going to unlock Alex Sarr. It's what's going to maximize Bilal Coulibaly, the switchability, the ability to operate as a low man. Versatility isn't just guarding 1 through 5, and I think that's one of the biggest areas of draft discussion that we need to improve on as a community. Versatility, flexibility defensively isn't just who you can initially guard in matchups. It's the kind of roles you can fill. Can you use this player in ball screens at the level of the screen? Can he play and drop? Can he hedge and recover? Can he operate as a low man? Can he blow up plays out on the perimeter as a defensive playmaker? Cooper Flagg does all of those things. And I think from a coaching perspective, what you really want to draft is a player who can fill a multitude of roles for you. Can Cooper Flagg offensively handle the basketball? Can he operate as a cutter? Can he sit in the dunker spot? Can he space out to the corner? Can he space out above the break? Can he attack closeouts? A lot of those things are going to be yeses long-term for Cooper Flagg, which is what maintains him being the number 1 pick here for me in this mock draft. Although, like I said, it's a lot closer than it has been in previous mocks for me because of the play of a certain Rutgers point guard. Moving into pick number 2, I don't think there's going to be any shock here who I have the New Orleans Pelicans selecting after a really poor start to the season with a ton of injuries. The Pelicans find themselves in a pretty unique spot to actually add top-end talent to what is, I think, a pretty solid roster. Now, they do have a lot of salary. They have a lot of long-term questions for sure, but there is also a real collection of talent here. So whether New Orleans looks to explore the trade market and add a multitude of draft picks, or if they just keep their talent, add to it here with the draft, I think the Pelicans could quickly kind of rewrite the direction of this organization. And second overall, I have the New Orleans Pelicans selecting point guard Dylan Harper from Rutgers, and I chose my words very specifically there. I do think Dylan Harper is a point guard. Now, he does have kind of a bigger guard body. He's capable of probably defending upward, but I think if you're going to really maximize who Dylan Harper is as a player, he's going to have the ball in his hands, and he's going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit, running a collection of actions, whether that be horns action, whether you're utilizing him in isolation, just simple 1-5 high ball screens. I think one of the things that we haven't seen Rutgers do a ton, but a little bit, is using Ace Bailey as a screener for Dylan Harper, and I think with his first step, which is, I think, deceivingly very quick, a very decisive and skilled crossover to boot, Dylan Harper is just flat out a tremendous ball handler, and I think that really sets up the rest of his game as a downhill finisher, someone who can generate and get paint touches, and then off of that, the ability to kick the basketball out to shooters. He has very good passing vision, very good court awareness and court mapping, something we talk about often with someone like Nikola Jokic. From a point guard position, Dylan Harper has those traits. Now, I think from a concern standpoint of why isn't Dylan Harper just the surefire number 1 overall pick, I do think something that is super important for a high usage on-ball player what does the shot making look like off the dribble? And throughout his EYBL time and high school tape, we have seen him be a very high level mid-range assassin, able to get to spots and score. And I think that's something that has carried its way into his time at Rutgers. What I think we all want to see is that expand to the three-point line. So far, it's been a little bit of a shaky expansion to the college three-point line. How will that work to above the break threes? If you look at the shot diet for guys like Trae Young, Luka Doncic, Cade Cunningham, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, some of the high-usage heliocentric players in the league, a majority of their three-point looks come above the break, not from the corner, given the types of shots that they create. So when we're projecting Dylan Harper to the NBA, those are going to be things that's going to be the area of the floor he needs to work out of. So how does his pull-up three-point shot look from 24, 25 feet? I think that's some of the big questions we still have on him. But this is a heck of a player, a heck of a prospect, and one who in a lot of other drafts might just flat out go first overall. Now, I don't want to say he won't still. Again, I'm non-committal on who will be the first overall pick. I do think it is somewhat team-dependent too. Washington drafted a couple of guards last year, and I think Cooper Flagg's such a unique option for them for their front court defensive versatility moving forward that I still went that route. But in a vacuum, depending on which team gets the first overall pick, it's an open discussion right now. So I think Harper or Flagg, both in consideration for the number 1 overall pick, and I think both of them will be locked to be top 2 picks in the 2025 NBA draft ultimately. Moving into pick number 3 here now. Some might say this is where the draft really starts. I think Utah specifically in this position is such a fascinating team to talk about. They've drafted a huge collection of guards in recent years. You think about Keontae George, Bryce Sensabaugh, drafted Isaiah Collier last year. They have this real collection of young players, and that collection of young players is leading to a lot of losing right now. But I don't see the Jazz really changing suit with the way that they're trying to go about this. I think that they are drafting for potential, they're drafting for development, and that's exactly what you would expect from Danny Ainge at the top of the draft. So the Utah Jazz here now picking 3rd overall. This is a really great opportunity for them to add to their roster. And one thing they haven't drafted a ton over the last couple of years is wings and forwards, and they have a chance to grab one here with a lot of potential as a shot maker. 3rd overall, I have the Utah Jazz selecting forward Ace Bailey from Rutgers, and he's an impressive prospect and a really intriguing prospect. I think when it's all said and done, if we look back on this draft 10, 15 years from now, I think Ace Bailey is the real swing player in this class. And I don't just mean it for evaluators like myself who don't have a say in the actual 2025 NBA draft. I mean it for the teams who are going to be picking. For someone who drafts Ace Bailey 3rd overall over a multitude of other really talented prospects in this class. This class is absolutely loaded. If you draft Ace Bailey, you are putting a vote of confidence into him that you think he is going to be better than the prospects behind him, clearly. And that is a real risk given the talent in this draft. But I could say that the same way about if teams pass on Ace Bailey. If you overlook Ace Bailey and the shot making that he has really showcased on multiple levels in the college game, in the high school game, EYBL film, he is such an impressive shot maker that if you pass on him, you might in retrospect look pretty stupid because of the size, length, athleticism. He's extremely bouncy. There's a lot to love, and I think the shot making specifically as a mid-range pull-up shot, there's a lot of people out there, especially with the analytics era of basketball, and something, I do subscribe to analytics. They are an extremely important aspect of the game. They make you smarter. They make you take better shots. It's a very important nuance to the game, and analytics need to be respected. At the same time, though, I see people on Twitter, I see people all over the place saying they will not believe in Ace Bailey, that they're completely out on Ace Bailey because he shoots too many mid-range jump shots. Here's my rebuttal to that. What kind of shots, if he does develop into a star player in the NBA, what kind of shots do you think he will be able to consistently get against drop coverage, the most prevalent form of pick and roll defense in the NBA? What kind of shots do you think he will consistently be able to get open? Mid-range jump shots. So if that's his, bread and butter, if that's his primary shot to go to, and it's the easiest shot for him to consistently generate out of ball screens at the next level, well, guess what? That's a really dangerous recipe. So I think there's a real upside here with Ace Bailey. Now, does he turn into a Brandon Ingram type player? I'm not exactly sure. That's where, the lack of ball handling right now. If you draft Ace Bailey, it's not just, hey, we're getting this elite shot maker potentially. It's, can he develop his handle? Can he actually read the floor at all while the basketball's in his hands? What's preventing a team from blitzing the life out of him? I think his functional strength is pretty poor right now. He plays very, very skinny, and what I mean by that is when teams crowd him, he really doesn't have a lot of functional strength to work off of. He can't really go into, a shoulder bump. I think a player that he should study a lot is Dirk Nowitzki, actually. And I'm not just talking about the one-legged fadeaway. I more so mean about how Dirk Nowitzki could kind of work in a phone booth. And what I mean by that is when he's crowded, he could get to a bump, get guys off of him, and then attack off the dribble from there, especially younger Dirk. That's the type of player Ace Bailey should be modeling his game after a bit, adding to his handle that way, really playing off of his first step, playing out of triple threat more, and widening his base to play a little bit stronger functionally in the half court offensively. Pick number 4, the Toronto Raptors here now, a team that I think is really fascinating long term. They have a lot of committed salary already to some young players like Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett as well. They're a real trade team to watch at the deadline. I have a trade guide out on this team as well, so if you're a Raptors fan, make sure to go check that one out. Toronto's really fascinating, and I think is going to be a great team to keep our eyes on over the next couple of years, and this pick is essential for them. Last time they had the 4th overall pick, they knocked it out of the park with Scotty Barnes. So here, Masai Ujiri has another great opportunity to add young talent to his team, and I think we have to look international here. And what I mean by that is a player who is dominating college basketball from the international route, and that player, 4th overall, is Kasparas Jakucionis. In my last mock draft, I had a little bit of criticism for him, and it really stemmed off of the lack of aggression as a scorer, despite brilliance and dominance early in the college season, because he was taking 3 shots, 4 shots a game. It seems like Kasparas Jakucionis heard me, or the Illinois coaching staff heard me, because since the moment I recorded and posted that video, Jakucionis has been way more aggressive looking for his own shot. And I think that specifically is what elevates him here. I had him in the teens in my last mock draft, despite talking about all the talent that I saw on film. It was what I needed to see shot diet wise. And the shot diet, and what I mean by that especially, is the volume has significantly ramped up in a way that I can really subscribe and buy in to what I'm seeing from Jakucionis in the college game right now, which is sheer dominance. He is a step ahead of all of the competition. Reading the floor, utilizing the weak side of the floor as a passer, hitting the big man on rolls when he should, and really asserting himself not only as a pull-up three-point jump shooter, something I've been very impressed with out of his pick-and-roll reps, but also the ability to get to the rim, use both his left and right hand as a ball handler. He's a very well-rounded, solid player, and I think this is where the conversation at pick number 3 gets really serious, because a team like Utah, who I just don't know if they have a true lead point guard, could they look at someone like a Kasparas Jakucionis? Could they look at someone like an Egor Demin to draft 3rd overall over Ace Bailey? That's what makes this draft so unique, so interesting. There's so much top-end talent, and it's loaded with a lot of good talent throughout the entire first round too. I think Toronto here is getting a premium player, someone who they can really run their offense through. Now, the rest of the fit with Quickley, the fit with Barrett, the fit with Scotty Barnes might be a little awkward, but I think if there's a player in this draft who's able to utilize the talents of those guys well, it would probably be Jakucionis with his overall court mapping and floor general ability we've seen so far for the Fighting Illini. Moving on to pick number 5, we have the Charlotte Hornets here now at this point in time. The Hornets, listen, there's a lot of talent. They have, I think, a lot of upside long-term. Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, I know there's been some criticism about their shot diets in the NBA. I'm talking about shot diets a lot in this video, but I think it's really important. People are ragging on the amount of three-pointers LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller are getting up on a night-to-night basis. I think it's smart. I think it's really good. I like the direction Charles Lee is trying to take this Hornets team. Now, it doesn't mean it's leading to winning right now. I think this team is at a real talent deficit, especially at the center spot. They have to figure that out long term. I'm not addressing that here 5th overall. I think the Hornets should go with talent over fit at this point in time, and I think this player would still fit regardless anyway because of the shooting that Charlotte is playing with. So 5th overall, I have the Charlotte Hornets selecting guard Egor Demin out of BYU. The Russian guard prospect has really dazzled, especially early in the season. Now, I think Jakucionis at this point in time has overtaken him a little bit in terms of where he's at in league draft circles. But I think currently, Demin is still a very impressive prospect, and one thing that I've seen him kind of evolve throughout the year so far early in the college basketball season is how teams are defending him and how he's adjusting and reacting to that. Specifically, when it comes to him coming off of ball screens earlier in the year, I think he was really able to exploit drop coverage a ton by either getting 2 feet into the paint, generating those paint touches like we talked about earlier, and then kicking the ball out to open shooters. I think one of the most creative passers in this entire class, specifically with the velocity and the accuracy he's able to put into those creative passes, is what really impresses me. Early in the season, he was getting wherever he wanted, and if you were in drop coverage, there was a real chance he's just going to pull up into a pull-up three. Teams have adjusted how they're guarding him. They're showing more bodies at the level of the screen. They're fighting harder over the top of these screens. And instead of kind of forcing the issue or settling for bad shots or picking up his dribble early, he's just making the right pass. He's reading whether or not he can start a ball reversal based on where the weak side defender is moving. And then also, if the weak side defense is maybe not showing as strongly, he's doing a good job just hitting the pocket immediately, finding a short roller. And I think one thing specifically that I notice every time I watch BYU, I just think Egor Demin around NBA talent is going to be so much better, because if teams have to show an extra body to him, especially based on where his shots are coming from right now and the types of shots he's taking and making, I think he's going to draw a lot of attention. Instead of hitting, mid-level college basketball players on a short roll, he might be hitting, a really talented player. Like, you could use Brandon Miller, you could use LaMelo Ball as a small-to-small screener here. This would create a lot of optionality for Charlotte in terms of who's handling the basketball, who's setting screens for who, and the kind of actions you can play off of having this much perimeter talent would be very, very intriguing. Not to mention the combination of size in their backcourt. LaMelo Ball is already a big point guard. Egor Demin's a huge point guard. You would have just this real collection of length and size from your point guard, shooting guard, and small forward spots moving forward, that it gives Charlotte a lot of flexibility in terms of how they build their roster moving forward. Now, I do think that they still have real flaws to address even after this draft pick, but I think Demin just a very impressive prospect offensively, and one that I think would really elevate Charlotte's half-court offense around the shooting of both LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. Moving into pick number 6, the 76ers here now. At the time that I set up this draft order, their pick's still light in the top 6, and it is top 6 protected. So this could be a premium asset for Philadelphia moving forward if they are able to retain this pick long term. Of course, a lot can still change. There's many months of the NBA season still to go, so this is by no means a guarantee that Philly will be picking in the top 6. But in the event that they are, I have them here going with Tre Johnson from Texas. And this is, I think, one of the more interesting spots in the draft. At pick 6, after we get out of the top 5, there's a real collection of other players that teams could strongly consider, and Tre Johnson just continues to insert himself into this conversation with the types of shots that he's not only taking, but consistently and reliably making, living off of a ton of pull-up threes. He is just an absolute flamethrower from three, and he's athletic. And I think that there are some real flaws with him as a playmaker, as someone who's he's not going to be a lead guard for you. But what I could see him kind of being is this combination of Norm Powell, the Norm Powell that we've seen be super successful for the Clippers this season, and a variety of other difficult shot makers. And Michael Porter Jr. in a way comes to mind, even though MPJ more so plays off the catch. Tre Johnson a little bit more fluid with the ball in his hands at this point in time. I think a lot of that, you can attribute to some of MPJ's back injuries early in his, college career, high school career specifically. But I think Tre Johnson, from an athletic standpoint, from a shot-making standpoint, definitely garners discussion to be a top 10 pick. And for Philadelphia right now, yes, they do have a collection of guards in Jared McCain. Yes, they have Tyrese Maxey. I think if you look at Philadelphia's bench and this overall collection of talent, they're pretty talent deficient across the board, in my opinion. So just drafting someone who's capable of putting the ball in the basket, doing so consistently, stretching the floor, shooting, and making difficult shots from deep, that's the type of player I think Philadelphia could still fit into their roster. And the more ball handling, the better, because I don't think either one of Tyrese Maxey or Jared McCain is really a true point guard. So adding in extra ball handling kind of to build an ecosystem of dribbling and creation offense, I think would be very beneficial for the long-term future of the 76ers. Now at pick number 7, the Portland Trailblazers here at this spot in the draft. And I think for Portland specifically, This is such a unique spot. The Blazers typically have looked for upside. Now, last year they did draft Donovan Clingan, who I thought was a tremendous pick for them, and I thought really addressed a long-term need that this Blazers team had in terms of rim protection, rim pressure offensively, screen setting, doing a lot of the dirty work that sometimes DeAndre Ayton doesn't live up to doing. The Blazers have that center now in Donovan Clingan, and I think around that still have a ton of upside in Shaedon Sharpe, who has had nights this year where he has outplayed superstars, including taking down Anthony Edwards, basically one-on-one, beating him consistently in isolation, dominating that matchup earlier this season. Shaedon Sharpe, there's still so much potential, and he was the last number 7 overall pick for the Blazers. So for me, I think 7th overall for Portland, it's another upside grab here, and I have them selecting VJ Edgecombe from Baylor, probably the most athletic player in this entire draft class. He is a freak athlete, and it right now is presenting itself a ton defensively in the stocks department. He's getting his hand on the basketball a ton defensively. There's moments where he rotates over as the weak side defender, and on film you don't even see him coming. He just shows up out of nowhere, it feels like, almost like he's just teleporting to the basketball, and that's just how athletic he is. There's been plays where he meets guys at the rim, where he rotates off the three-point line, and you just would never assume he's able to get there. He has the unique combination of size, speed, quickness, athleticism, and vertical leaping ability, and he has a timing to all of this too, where he's not only able to have these physical tools, but they're able to be functionally used because of his timing, his understanding, and his reaction time specifically. He's just such a unique prospect. And offensively right now, there are some positive results. There's also a lot of questions. He's shooting in the 20s from 3 right now, percentage-wise. So for Portland, a team that I think does need more off-ball spacing, more perimeter spacing, this is, again, a long-term upside pick. This isn't a draft VJ Edgecombe, solve some of your problems, and improve immediately pick. And, that might turn some fans off. And that might even turn off the front office. But I do think with the Blazers' current front office in place, they are viewing development. They're viewing a long-term window as the essential means for drafting. And VJ Edgecombe, I do think, fits into that kind of criteria, that kind of category. And I think for the Blazers specifically, if they're drafting still in the top 10, it's about upside, it's about talent acquisition, and VJ Edgecombe might be one of the most long-term intriguing prospects in this entire draft because of his collection of physical tools and the functional use of them defensively right now, and then the upside offensively as a transition finisher, a lob threat, a backside cutter, and if the three-point shot ever develops, oh my goodness, he would be an absolute problem in the NBA. Pick number 8, the Indiana Pacers, who have been ravaged by injuries this season, just made a trade for Thomas Bryant to really solve their center spot a bit. I think for Indiana here specifically, what they're looking for though, Thomas Bryant is a band-aid. Thinking about James Wiseman and Isaiah Jackson both coming off of Achilles tears. Do the Pacers really have their center plan for the next 4 or 5 years solved? I don't think so, especially given Miles Turner's contract situation right now too. Now, I'm not saying Turner won't be there, but I think at worst, Indiana needs to be exploring the draft for a backup center option, and especially if they're picking in the lottery, something I'm not sure that they actually will be come draft time, because I do still believe in this team quite a bit. Right now, they just have not been good enough, and I think a lot of that has stemmed from the center position, so I think addressing and solving your backup center spot long-term makes a ton of sense here. 8th overall, I have the Indiana Pacers selecting center Khaman Maluach from Duke, former Basketball African League prospect and product. And I think the key word here, if you're going to talk about Maluach as a prospect, the real upside, the real what can he do for your team centers around one word, and that word is rim. And if you talk to NBA coaches, you talk to NBA personnel, what they're going to tell you is you have to win at the rim, and that's something Khaman Maluach is going to help you do a ton. Now, he's very raw. That's another key word. That's another buzzword if you're going to talk about him as a draft prospect. But the rim is where you win and lose a lot of basketball games in the NBA, and drafting a 7'2" big man with a 7'5" plus wingspan who is very athletic, improving pretty much every single day in terms of a shot blocker because of his timing and his kind of instincts that are still developing. As a player, I have connections with some people within the Basketball African League. The amount of optimism, the amount of excitement around this kid is really immense. And there's a lot of people believing that he has just not even scratched the surface yet as a basketball prospect. He's been impactful for Duke, playing within his role, playing within himself. And I think those have been things that NBA scouts have looked at as real positives moving forward. Indiana's such an impressive option for him too, because I think next to Halliburton, you have the type of player who can really weaponize the rim pressure that he's going to exert offensively, the screen setting and rolling capabilities that he's going to be able to play out of. I think, Rick Carlisle in the past specifically has worked with non-shooting big men. You think about Tyson Chandler, you think about Jan Mahimi, you think about Brendan Haywood. There's been a collection of players that Rick Carlisle has found success with that are non-shooting big men, and I think specifically for Maluach, moving forward, I think Indiana would be a dream destination for him, given the amount of talent on this roster and who specifically is playing point guard for the foreseeable future for the Indiana Pacers. Pick number 9, the Chicago Bulls here now, and this is an interesting spot for Chicago. Nikola Vucevic very likely gets traded this trade deadline. The Bulls will continue to dangle Zach LaVine's contract. Not sure if he actually gets dealt or not. We'll see. I think there is one destination that makes sense. Not sure if it's actually going to get done, though. So, pick number 9, the Chicago Bulls here. I think going with the center makes a ton of sense. Welcome to the first round, Derik Queen from Maryland, the former Montverde Academy center. Started the year off tremendous for the Terrapins with a 2020 performance, and he hasn't really stepped off the gas since. He has been utterly dominant in college basketball, and I have an interesting combination comparison here for Derik Queen going into the NBA. He reminds me a little bit of a current Bull in Jalen Smith, their recently signed big man, with his ability to stretch the floor a little bit, shoot the ball from the mid-range a bit. Kind of reminds me of some of his film pre-draft, but then also a player that he reminds me of somewhat pre-draft too, and then also during his time in the NBA is Montrezl Harrell. And what I really mean by that is Montrezl Harrell had one of the best face-up games for any big man in the NBA. Now, Harrell was a little undersized. Derik Queen's a little bit bigger than him, and I think a little less explosive athletically. But Harrell specifically always found success out of the mid-post, working off the baseline as a ball handler. And it was such a unique player archetype because there's not a lot of 4-5 men in the NBA who are capable of facing up to the basket, hitting you with spin moves, hitting you with, kind of a jab step and go. That was what Montrezl Harrell's game was really predicated off of. And I think if you turn on Maryland tape and you watch the Terrapins play right now, you're going to see Derik Queen working out of 15 feet, 20 feet away from the hoop with the ball, with a live handle. His movement pattern somewhat reminds me of Miles Turner, as well as a pick and pop threat, where he's going to set a screen and kind of just waltz his way into open space. It's just consistently finding areas to work. And I think specifically in the NBA, if you're playing with someone who's able to make defenders work, especially in drop coverage, like around Kobe White, for example, Derik Queen could be a guy who I think fits really well next to that. This is a developmental upside pick. Derik Queen, I don't even know if he was on a lot of people's first round radar coming into the season. Now he's starting to look more and more like a potential lottery pick. He has just been utterly dominant in college basketball. Somewhat reminds me too a little bit of Justin Patton, former Cretan first round pick who went to Minnesota, I think just outside of the lottery. So there's a collection of big men who I think are somewhat reminiscent of Derik Queen. He is his own player, so I think, keeping that in mind as well. These are kind of loose comparisons. They in no way, shape, or form are, kind of limits or ceilings on what he could potentially be in the NBA either. So it's still important to evaluate the prospect individually, and I think Chicago is getting a good prospect here in Derik Queen, someone who has a real motor, gets on the glass, and has an offensive skill set that could potentially blossom into a real impact player long-term for the Bulls. Pick number 10, the Detroit Pistons here now. They have been significantly better this season than they were a year ago. Obviously, some of that is a credit to JB Bickerstaff, but also a credit to some of the internal development from some of the Pistons players. I think Jaden Ivey has nights where he just, dazzles and shines like I thought he would a few drafts ago when the Pistons selected him. Cade Cunningham has been flexing triple doubles here and there. He's been an impressive heliocentric player. And I think for Detroit specifically, if you look at how this team wants to build moving forward, it's about adding shooting. It's about adding more perimeter talent. And I think they're a hard team to mock for because it's like, do you just go best player available? That's something they've done a couple of times in recent drafts. You think about, Ausar Thompson. You think about Ron Holland. But I don't know exactly the direction the Pistons are going to look to go. But 10th overall, I have them selecting forward Will Riley out of Illinois, and I think this is where fit really begins to matter. If the Pistons are going to look to take the next step from being an intriguing young team to an up-and-coming winning team, they need players who can fit around their collection of really good talent already. And Will Riley is someone who really stands out to me in that role. You think about the way Illinois has been playing this season with Kasparas Jakucionis being such a ball-dominant decision maker for the Fighting Illini. Will Riley's been having a great season alongside him, and it's really not a shock when you look at his skill set, the ability to knock down perimeter jump shots specifically off of dribble pull-ups. He's a guy where you get him into an NBA system with the spacing and his shot-making prowess specifically, which we've seen all throughout his high school tape as well. Will Riley could be a very, very intriguing long-term option for Detroit. Not only does he fit, but I think the upside is here too. Given the fact that Tobias Harris is on just a 2-year contract, I think Will Riley drafting him in the 2025 draft would be a very sensible move for the Pistons to take him, allow him to develop the first year while you still have Tobias Harris on your roster, and you might be looking at a real wing option for your team moving forward. I just really like his game. I know a lot of other people around the league do as well. And I think specifically it all stems from the three-point shooting and being able to play off of a heliocentric ball handler makes him a really wonderful fit in Detroit alongside Cade Cunningham with the Pistons. Just a reminder here, there is a brand new series on the channel where I take over the Phoenix Suns in NBA 2k25 and rebuild them, try to right all of the wrongs that Matt Ishbia has caused there for Phoenix Suns fans, including trading away both Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Episode 1 is already out on the channel. Make sure to go watch that one after this mock draft. Episode 2 will be coming out very, very shortly after this video, maybe a day or two after. So keep that one on the back burner. Watch for it. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more future uploads. Into pick number 11 now, we have the Brooklyn Nets here. And the Nets have been, I think, a surprising team this season, been playing better than I think a lot of people expected. I think some of that is a direct result of the coaching style that Jordi Fernandez has brought into Brooklyn and the system that he has installed early here, finding real success from veterans like Dennis Schroeder. This is a prime team to watch for at the trade deadline. They are going to make a multitude of moves. They will probably trade Dorian Finney-Smith. The reason that they will for sure make those moves, not only did they get their own pick back when they traded Mikal Bridges away, they're too good right now for their pick to be that valuable. They don't want to be picking 11 in this draft. They want to be picking top 5. So they will trade some players. Keep your eyes on the Brooklyn Nets over the next couple of months or so. But 11th overall, I have the Brooklyn Nets here selecting guard Ben Saraf from Ratiopharm Ulm. And I think Saraf is such an interesting prospect. In this mock draft, he fell just a little bit further than I really think he should have. And the reason for that is based on the teams that we're picking. You know, Chicago's already got their guard situation kind of solved in a way with Kobe White and Josh Giddey. You think about Detroit with Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham. Would those teams really take someone like Ben Saraf, even though he's very talented? Does he fit with those teams? And I think the answer to that is no. Brooklyn, however, though, has a real question at the point guard spot or their combo guard spot long-term. Cam Thomas is a restricted free agent at the end of the season. I would have to assume he's going to be there long-term, but with Schroeder probably gone, I just don't know if the Nets have a real direction for a lead ball handler, and I think that's where Saraf can really shine. If he lands in a situation where he's going to have the basketball in his hands, and specifically playing in a system like Brooklyn's where dribble handoffs and zoom action create a lot of advantages early in possessions for a guy like Saraf, who has the ability with his solid positional size, standing around 6'6", to pass over the top of the defense, to occupy help defense, draw defenders in, and make the right skip pass over the top. That's something he does very, very well. Now, he does have a tendency to leave his feet somewhat prematurely, at times causing extra turnovers that maybe he wouldn't have if he just played off of 2 feet a little bit better. There are areas of growth for Ben Saraf to like kind of lean into. I think he just needs to evolve as a three-point shooter. I think a lot of that will stem from him just getting more and more reps. You know, at times I've heard people, spit out the Killian Hayes comparison. I just really don't think that's real. I think Ben Saraf's a far superior ball handler than him. And I think even though the passing is similar, I think Saraf as a player is just a lot better, and I think some of that stems from his ability to rise up into a mid-range pull-up jump shot. And I know, like I said earlier, the analytics say that's not a great shot, but when it comes to actually defending in team basketball, that's the shot you're willing to give up. So if you have a player who's really good at making and taking those shots and generating those looks consistently, they're probably going to go in a decent amount. So you can almost bet on Ben Saraf being a semi-effective mid-range pull-up jump shooter, even though it's not the most efficient shot in all of basketball. It's still one that could have some intrigue for a team, and specifically for a team that's probably going to be needing more offensive creators going forward. I think the Brooklyn Nets are a really good landing spot for Ben Saraf in this year's draft. Moving on to pick number 12, the Sacramento Kings here now. Remember, this pick is top 12 protected. So the Kings actually keep it in this mock draft based on how the beginning of their season has gone. I don't think it's super shocking. I had a lot of questions about what this team was going to look like after getting DeMar DeRozan, even though it was a real talent improvement over Harrison Barnes. I think this is also a testament to how talent doesn't trump fit all the time in the NBA, and I think there are some real problems with the way this Kings team is built in terms of athleticism, in terms of size, in terms of defensive acumen, and in terms of just sheer three-point shooting. That has been really compounded as well with how poorly Kevin Huerter shot the ball this year. So Sacramento, I think, is just in a weird spot right now. I think that they need to add just more sheer talent and size to their roster, specifically when it comes to three-point shooting talent. So 12th overall, I have the Sacramento Kings here selecting forward Liam McNeeley from UConn, a player who exerts his physical abilities at the college level, and he did so in the high school ranks as well. Getting on the glass consistently, rebounding the basketball at a pretty high rate for a shooting type of player offensively. I think McNeely's the type of player who offers enough functional size and defensive athleticism and IQ to not be picked on consistently, while offensively being a really adequate floor spacer, someone who can get out and run in transition. I think some of the early comparisons, kind of stem from a Corey Kispert type player, although he's a little bit bigger than Corey Kispert. I think that's the type of player Sacramento would be getting here. And if you look at the historical draft range of players with this kind of archetype, they tend to go between pick 11 and pick number 15. I'm sure a lot of Kings fans right now would love to have Cam Johnson. That's, I think, another pretty solid comparison, not a direct comparison, not a perfect one, but a solid one for the type of archetype, the type of role that Liam McNeeley could fill in the NBA. Now, I know UConn's had a couple of rough weeks here. Specifically, the Maui Invitational Tournament was not good. But I think, specifically McNeeley as a prospect, when you project him going into the NBA, I think one of the biggest downfalls for UConn right now is the lack of a true floor general point guard. I think Aiden Mahaney's struggled a little bit in that kind of role for them. Solo ball is kind of a combo guard. So I think for UConn specifically, they're missing Tristan Newton a lot, and I think it's hurting the collection of other players that they were able to bring in this year. They're still extremely talented, and a player like Liam McNeeley should still be really in consideration for a lottery pick or fringe lottery pick in the 2025 NBA draft. Moving on to pick number 13, we have the San Antonio Spurs here now. The Spurs are looking pretty good, man. Chris Paul's been playing at a good level. Jeremy Sohan, I think the early point guard experience and experiment last year, I had the opportunity to ask Greg Popovich about that, and he said, and I'll never forget it, he said it's a whole new world for him. And I think we're seeing some of the benefits from that, even though it led the Spurs to a lot more losing and it didn't go well in the moment. I think there was real growth from that opportunity, and it points to how development isn't linear and how development doesn't always equal production. Throwing players into new roles, experimenting with the things that they can do, it gives them growth opportunity, even if it doesn't lead to baskets or doesn't lead to assists. What it does is it makes them more comfortable. Once you scale them back down into a different kind of role, they internally feel like, first of all, I have this experience, I can do this, but then secondly, you're also just getting that natural skill development for a young player, and I think that's something we've seen early in the season. Sohan just looks more comfortable. He's been playing a lot better this year, back reverted into a natural role, but I think that role has expanded because of some of that experience he has a year ago. Wembanyama is like a top 10 player in the world. I told you guys this was coming. You go back to all my 2023 NBA draft stuff. I was saying he was going to be an all-star caliber player as a rookie. I do think he lived up to that. He finished second in the league in Defensive Player of the Year as a rookie. That's ludicrous. The Spurs are going to be really good, and this is a great opportunity for them to add more talent. I have them selecting here wing Knueppel from Duke. With Liam McNeeley off the board, Knueppel is probably one of the better movement shooters still available in the draft at this point, and I think specifically his decisiveness is what would allow him to be a good player there in San Antonio around Devin Vassell, around Stephon Castle, who has also been awesome as a rookie. I should have talked about him earlier too. Knueppel would fit right in with this group. I think his movement shooting, his ability to kind of play off of curls, ripping and go back the opposite direction after running off of a stagger screen. Just the floor spacing, natural relocation skills, all of those things just would fit really brilliantly in San Antonio and kind of addresses something they don't have a ton of right now in terms of just sheer movement shooting. They have guys who can shoot the ball, but they don't have a lot of guys you would run, floppy action for, even though that's not a very common action in the NBA anymore. But Knueppel is someone who I think could just really thrive and shine. You could use him in a lot of unique ways as a screener for Wembanyama when Wemby has the ball out on the perimeter, whether that be ghost screens or just actually setting real screens and trying to force mismatches, switches, trying to get Wembanyama into space a little bit easier. Someone with shooting prowess like Knueppel could make a ton of sense in that kind of role too. So I think from an X's and O standpoint, this makes a lot of sense for San Antonio. From a sheer roster fit standpoint, it also makes a ton of sense. And I think it would give the Spurs some real added three-point shooting as well, just from a floor spacing perspective moving into future seasons. Pick number 14, end of the lottery here with the Utah Jazz back on the clock. Remember, I had them go with Ace Bailey, third overall. So now it's important for the Jazz to look in maybe other directions. I talked about maybe finding a true ball handler, lead point guard for them as an essential route that I think that they still have to go. I know that, yes, they drafted Keyonte George. They have drafted a collection of guards. I still don't believe that they have their true franchise point guard at this point in time. Jazz fans, let me know if you disagree with that. I want to hear your guys' perspective too in the comment section. But 14th overall, I have the Utah Jazz here selecting guard Boogie Fland from Arkansas. And for years, everyone's known it now, Kentucky guards translate really well to the NBA. And it's probably on behalf of John Calipari's ability to recruit. This will be our first experiment to see if that has translated from Kentucky to Arkansas. Did Calipari bring NBA guard skills with him to the Razorbacks? And I think the answer to that is going to be yes. Boogie Fland has been a real fun player to watch in the NBA, or in college basketball. I think he'll be even better in the NBA with more spacing, more talent around him, and the increased pace that we see in the NBA. I think his skill set specifically, being able to get downhill, get to certain spots, play in more open space, will really accentuate his skill set as a shot maker, as a scorer, and I think he's become an underrated playmaker as well, averaging over 5 assists per game for the Razorbacks this year. He's someone who, for me, somewhat reminiscent of Cole Anthony in some ways, but I think he's a better overall prospect than that. I wasn't super high on Cole Anthony in his draft, and I'm a little bit more bullish here on Boogie Fland because I do think his ability to read the basketball court, make decisions with a live handle, play make for others, and then still create for himself is just, I think, a step above Cole Anthony. It's a similar archetype of player, but I just think he's a better sheer player and a more talented player to boot. So I think he's good enough to supersede Keyonte George. I think he's good enough to supersede the other pieces there. And I think for Utah specifically, with Lauri Markkanen and how dependent he is on other players creating looks for him, and actions creating looks for him, and then also Ace Bailey not being the best ball handler decision maker right now either, I think drafting a point guard who can supersede the current existing guards on the roster is important and extremely essential for the future of the Utah Jazz. And I think Boogie Fland is going to be the upgrade over the current existing pieces in the backcourt for Utah presently. Pick number 15, the Houston Rockets here now. Houston's coming. I was trying to tell everyone. For years I've been saying this. I've been labeling them as a top 3, top 4 future. I got a lot of backlash from a lot of those comments. Well, guess what? They're here. They've made it. They're even better than I thought they would be this year. Honestly, I had them as a playoff team this year. I was even met with criticism when I was saying that. But they have outperformed those expectations too, and it's really on the back of their defense. The Rockets are a very good team. I think they are really, really close to making a big-time move for a star player as well. So this pick could either be on the move, or it could be an essential retooling piece here for them to add in another young player if they do trade out 2 or 3 young guys for an established star in the league. 15th overall, the Houston Rockets going with forward Adou Thiero from Arkansas. So back-to-back Razorbacks go here, and I am extremely excited about this pick, not only for the Houston Rockets, but just in general. Thiero is a pro basketball player, and I say that with 100% certainty. He's going to have a good long career in the NBA. for a number of reasons. First of all, I think his ability to play off of 2 feet offensively is extremely impressive. He is someone, I still think there's a lot of expansion he needs to make offensively, specifically with the ball in his hands. He's not the most comfortable player. I think we see that show up in his footwork sometimes. He gets very, very close to traveling quite a bit, which doesn't sound like a real positive trait, but I do think it's kind of a sign of where he still needs to develop. But if I had to give a comp for who he reminds me of every time I watch him play, and this is going to sound a little crazy, he reminds me a bit of OG Anunoby. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be that same level of player. I'm not saying he's going to have that same type of career. Anunoby's an awesome player, one of the better players in the Eastern Conference even right now. I don't think Adou Thiero is going to be that quality of player necessarily, but he's very reminiscent in terms of the body type. He's got a real physical, strong, big body. He's extremely athletic, and that athleticism is extremely functional. What do I mean by that? I mean, he could catch the ball 6 feet away from the hoop, go up off of 2 feet, and dunk the ball in traffic comfortably. He's strong. He's got broad shoulders. He jumps well. He can jump in transition extremely well. You know, there's a couple of poster dunks he has this year, including on lob opportunities. He's a freak athletically, and you see it when he's playing basketball. And it's not just, oh, transition dunk, 1-on-0, throws down a windmill. It's, hey, I'm going to jump over this guy. Hey, I'm going to play through this contact. Hey, I'm going to rip the basketball away from this dude. Oh, transition defense? Yeah, I'm going to get up and block the heck out of this shot into the first row. There's so many different times we see Adou Thiero and his athleticism really on full display. He's been having a brilliant season for Arkansas this year. Just recently had a 24-point showing as well. He's been really playing good basketball this year. It's the first time I'm talking about him in a mock draft this cycle. I should have been talking about him in mock drafts earlier. Okay, I was overlooking just flat out how good of a basketball player this guy can be. He's going to be a good pro in the NBA, and this is a home run pick for the Houston Rockets in my estimation. Moving in now to pick number 16, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder here on the clock. This pick comes from the Miami Heat, which is lottery protected. So at 16th overall, the Thunder here now have an opportunity to get even richer. This team is so good. They have so much talent. They have so many draft picks. They could make a collection of moves. Now we'll see. Maybe Miami does make some big trades. They already traded Thomas Bryant. Maybe Jimmy Butler gets moved. Maybe the Heat end up retaining this pick because they trade a bunch of their pieces. We'll see what happens. But 16th overall here, the Oklahoma City Thunder select forward Asa Newell from Georgia. I talked about this in my last mock draft, and I want to harp on it again here because I do think it's just such an important trait for an NBA draft prospect. This guy understands his game, and what I want to say about that is sometimes there's players who almost fight the game, prospects who are extremely talented, but they don't consistently go back to what works. And I think for Asa Newell, he understands his game is inside first. He wants to be around the basket. He wants to finish at the hoop. He wants to play an inside center game where he's going to score at the basket, get on the offensive glass, and really score within 5 to 10 feet. Now, I do think the Georgia coaching staff is pushing him to expand his game, stretch out to the perimeter a little bit more. And I think for the Bulldog spacing specifically, it has required him to step out. But I think you can tell when you watch him play, he knows where he's comfortable playing, and he knows where he's most effective scoring the ball. And for Oklahoma City, listen, this team doesn't have a ton of inside scoring first. They like to space the floor. They like to stretch you out, win with ball movement, win with player movement. Those things are all, indicators of great NBA offense. That'll be something where I think Asa Newell will have to grow and develop as a player, but having that understanding of this is what I should be doing, and I want to continue to do it well, that's what will hopefully make Asa Newell an awesome player moving forward. So for OKC here, getting an inside-out player gives them a little bit of a unique blend. Again, now I think OKC can make a number of trades. Who knows if the Heat are even sending this pick to Oklahoma City this year anyway. But I do think overall, with everything considered, Asa Newell's a type of player that OKC really doesn't presently have on their roster from an inside-out perspective offensively. And he also just gives them more length, athleticism, and size, something that OKC has obviously prioritized when they brought in Isaiah Hartenstein. And I think just adding one more big body into the room would not be a bad decision at all if OKC ultimately is picking 16th overall. Newell's been extremely productive in college basketball this year, and I think around the right talent in the NBA, they could really maximize his athletic traits as well, moving to the next step in the NBA. Pick number 17, the Orlando Magic here now. This pick comes from the Denver Nuggets, who just haven't been as good this season. I think we're starting to see the results of talent drain there in Denver, allowing guys like Bruce Brown and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to walk. KCP should stand for keep championship players, something Denver clearly didn't get the memo on. The Lakers didn't either when they traded him to Washington a few years back. Losing talent is tough, and Orlando is now in a spot where they sit there with KCP, funny enough, and they get to have the benefits of this Denver Nuggets draft pick too. So Orlando in a really good spot. They've been playing great team basketball this year, even with some injuries to both Paolo Banchero and most recently Franz Wagner. This Magic team is really talented, and I think long-term, one of the areas I can still see them growing in as a team is their guard play specifically. So they're going to go with a large upside pick. This is a player who we had talked about as a potential top 3, top 4, top 5 pick coming into the 2025 NBA draft cycle. 17th overall, I have the Orlando Magic selecting guard Nolan Traore. The French guard has had a poor season for San Quentin this year. He's shooting about 35% from the field, sub 25% from 3. He has just not been effective or efficient in any way. But that doesn't mean to sell your stock completely on him, because there are still a lot of tools and traits and skills that he does flash as a primary ball handler and decision maker. And I think, again, like I talked about earlier with Jeremy Sohan, skill set and talent development is never always linear or equal to production and impact. And while right now Traore hasn't been a productive, efficient player, it doesn't mean he's not improving as a player. It doesn't mean he's not experiencing new areas for growth moving forward. And I think right now he's being challenged in ways that guys like Egor, Demin, and Kasparas Jakucionis aren't. Those two guys are cerebrally further ahead than any other college basketball player pretty much on the planet right now. As a result of that, they are picking apart defenses. They are destroying college basketball. Nolan Traore is, a kid essentially playing professional basketball and experiencing some of the struggles with that. He's facing bigger, stronger athletes. He's facing smarter professional players. And I think, if Traore went the college route, it's possible we would see him at moments picking apart defenses. Now, I still do think at this point in time, Jakucionis and Demin are better prospects than Traore. Both of them have better size and I think just overall better passing instincts than him. But Traore has, I think, some unique skills that are very impressive and unique, specifically when it comes to occupying help defense, specifically with the utilization of a roll man. So for a team like Orlando, who has some unique big men when it comes to Wendell Carter, someone who can shoot the ball a bit, also Mo Wagner, who's been a real bench spark plug for them as a scoring machine, I think specifically that fit, Traore plus Mo Wagner, is what really would intrigue me here for Orlando. Having someone like Traore who can occupy, drop coverage big men, get to spots inside the arc and kind of flex a little bit of scoring gravity around the hoop. I think from there, that's where Mo Wagner as a short roller, as someone who can catch the ball inside the nail and score from there. I think that combination could be really unique and dynamic. And I also think, around Orlando, if they want to get more creative, using Jalen Suggs as a pick and roll slip threat, using Paolo Banchero, using Franz Wagner in that kind of way as well. This would give optionality to Orlando using a variety of different screen setters with Traore because of his passing ability, specifically with the guy who's rolling or slipping to the hoop. I think that's where the fit really makes some sense. Again, this is a long-term upside grab. They already have Anthony Black. I really do love the long-term direction of Orlando. Earlier this season, I basically posed on Twitter saying, is Orlando just becoming Boston South with the way that their team is built? They have two great wing forward players. They have a shooting big man in Wendell Carter. They have dominant defensive guard play from Anthony Black, Jalen Suggs. They have Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to boot in there. I still think that the team needs more shooting. They need more overall offensive talent, but I think Traore could be a long-term upside grab for them if everything were to hit just right. Pick number 18, the Brooklyn Nets here now. This pick comes from the Milwaukee Bucks, who have really found themselves as of late. Went on a pretty significant winning stretch over the last few weeks or so, and I think Brooklyn now, we're starting to see this pick more so where we expected it, probably a pick in the 20s. The Nets still have a good opportunity here to add talent after at 11 overall going with Ben Saraf. I have the Brooklyn Nets here now taking his teammate forward Noah Asengwe from Ratiopharm. And I think, first of all, not only is it interesting drafting two professional teammates from another league and bringing them over here to the NBA, I think that the combination of these two guys makes actual sense on paper as well. For Brooklyn specifically, who's going to be looking for upside, Sengun is a player who could probably provide significant long-term upside if things go well in his development. For me, I'm a little bit more gun-shy on Sengun as a prospect because I do think he's just, for his archetype, for the type of player I think he'll need to be in the NBA, he's really scrawny right now. So I think a lot of his talent development will also hinge on body development. I think he needs to be in the weight room consistently. I think, dietitians are going to have a huge impact on how his career is going to play out. He needs to get a lot bigger. He needs to get a lot stronger because right now he has some of the worst functional strength in the NBA. The breeze might blow this guy over, to be honest with you. He's very light, very, very slim and thin. And, that's just his body type. He can't control that. But that's going to be something that is important for him as a forward in the NBA to develop. He's right now just really light, and he has trouble playing into traffic, playing through contact. As a four-man, you can't be those things in the NBA. You need to play physically strong, especially for teams that are trying to win playoff games at some point. You need to be able to withstand contact, play through traffic. So right now, that's going to be a big if for him. The skill development area, I think, again, is hinging on that. How does he play as a rim finisher? How does he operate as a pick-and-roll guy? Does he even set good screens in the NBA? Or is he just simply relegated to being a pick-and-pop option? Is he just going to stand in the corner? Because functionally, he's not strong enough to battle with other power forwards, other big men in the NBA. That's going to be one of the big questions. Right now, like, guarding Noah Sengun, I'd put like a wing on him. I'd put like a guard, honestly, guarding him, because I would just want to eliminate some of his quickness and find ways to kind of disrupt him. And I don't think he's strong enough to go through NBA guards even at this point in time. So that's going to be the big long-term development question. But some of the skills and tools are there. He's been somewhat productive as a three-point shooter. He's shown flashes as a cutter. Saraf's hitting him on multiple lobs this year for Ratiopharm. So there's definitely intrigue here, and some of the physical tools are very apparent from an athletic standpoint, from a coordination standpoint. He's a very unique prospect in this draft compared to others. So I think, long-term there could be some real upside here, but it might take a while for his body to really get to a point where he's an impactful player in the NBA on his rookie contract. Pick number 19, the Atlanta Hawks here now. This pick comes from the Los Angeles Lakers, and I think with the Hawks here at this point in time looking for pieces to fit around Trae Young, they've done a really great job. I think Jalen Johnson specifically is the primary headliner, someone who is just absolutely dominant on short rolls. That's the perfect kind of fit around Trae Young, and I think this is the type of player that we've seen Atlanta draft in the past, who I'm going to mock to them now, and I do think it makes some general sense for them. 19th overall, I have the Atlanta Hawks taking Thomas Sorber from Georgetown, and kind of reminds me a little bit of Thomas Robinson, a little bit of a throwback to the 2012 NBA draft out of Kansas. Thomas Robinson was a real mid-post player, could finish at the rim, exerted his athleticism over college players. And I think we see some of that from Sorber, who has been extremely productive this year for the Hoyas, and doing a lot of it from the mid-post and within, kind of catching around 16, 17, 18 feet, scoring from that range. A few years ago we saw the Hawks draft DeAndre Hunter in the top 5 because of how much they loved the face-up game out of the mid-court area. And I think for Sorber specifically, someone who's been as productive as he has been, as good as he has been for the Hoyas this season, he's the type of player I could see Atlanta looking at as somewhat of an intuitive cutter, someone who could fit off of Trae Young's heliocentrism, giving them different spacing opportunities, working him out of the short corner a little bit. He could be a unique blend with Jalen Johnson if you think about high ball screens between Trae Young and Jalen Johnson, putting Sorber as kind of a half-court spacer, 17, 18 feet away from the hoop, putting defenses in a real bind of, okay, well, do we rotate over to Jalen Johnson, who's about to catch the ball at the free throw line, and do we leave Sorber 17 feet away from the hoop where he's going to be pretty darn good and pretty consistent as a shooter? Now, again, if you're building your team off of mid-range shot making, there's real flaws in that, but I think Sorber has enough physical tools, enough functional traits in the half court. Offensively, he's pretty good around traffic, can play into contact pretty well. He's just a little bit functionally stronger than someone like Noah Sengun, who we just talked about with the last pick. So the Hawks are definitely an interesting team and an interesting landing spot for Thomas Sorber at this point in time. Pick number 20, the San Antonio Spurs are on the clock. This pick now comes from the Atlanta Hawks, funny enough. The Spurs, with their second first-round pick in this one, and a really great opportunity here to continue adding talent. Remember, we went with Knueppel at pick number 13. Now at pick number 20, I have the San Antonio Spurs selecting forward Colin Murray-Boyles from South Carolina. And I've talked at length about the uniqueness of Victor Wembanyama. This is one of the benefits you get from having a Victor Wembanyama on your team. You have this unique, dynamic stretch big man who can handle the ball, push in transition, space out to the perimeter, do so many different things for you, and he's so massive that teams just don't love the idea of putting a ton of wings on him as it is to begin with. This is where you get to draft kind of a unique player archetype. Someone like Colin Murray-Boyles, who has stretched out to the three-point line a bit this year, has made a few more threes this year than he has ever in his career before for the Gamecocks. So that's been an impressive development this year as well. But Murray-Boyles really at the heart of his game. He likes to play with his back to the basket. He likes to play inside the paint, inside the arc specifically. And he has the ability to handle, get to those spots, create for himself a little bit. And he's obviously very strong. He's got a man's body in a way. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Charles Barkley in terms of the way his body is distributed. Not necessarily the athleticism that Barkley had, of course, but just the kind of body type specifically. And for Murray-Boyles, I think transitioning to the NBA, it's going to be very tough for him at times, and I think that's going to be really dependent on which situation he lands in. But if he goes to San Antonio with Wembanyama, I think that's the best case scenario for him, and a situation that could work out very, very well for him specifically if he is in a situation with a stretch big man around him to kind of allow him to play to his strengths and offensive style in the NBA. Pick number 21, the Oklahoma City Thunder, back on the clock again here now. Remember, they had pick number 16 from Miami. This one at 21 is a swap with the Los Angeles Clippers. Here, Oklahoma City selects forward Alex Karaban from UConn. Earlier, I talked about some of the Huskies' struggles this college basketball season. I think a lot of that has led to maybe a little bit of disappointment in Alex Karaban. I've been seeing and hearing him maybe dropping a little bit in mock drafts and league circles, maybe not being as certain on him. I can still see Oklahoma City really valuing him as a player. Last year, they drafted Dylan Jones in the first round as a multi-year college basketball player. Alex Karaban, a third-year college basketball player for UConn, has been a 3-year starter for them. This is the type of player that's just going to be good in the NBA. I'm very, very confident in that. Honestly, somewhat reminiscent for me of the Clippers version of Nick Batum. Not Portland Trailblazers, where he had a little bit more juice, a little bit more athleticism, could get downhill. I think this is just a player who's going to have a long, impactful career as a spot-up threat, someone who can make the extra pass. He's a smart, cerebral player. You watch UConn play, you notice Alex Karaban on both ends of the floor is calling things out. He's telling everyone what to do. He's directing some traffic for them. And specifically this year with the absence of a guy like Tristan Newton, like I talked about earlier, that's been a real thing that UConn, I think, has had to rely on a bit is Alex Karaban's on-court presence. And I think with, a very natural long wingspan to boot, I think it's like a 7'1" wingspan is what he measured in at in the combine, I'm pretty sure, last year. He's an NBA player. He's got length that shows up in film. He had a 7-block game earlier this season. He shows up in the passing lanes. He's a smart off-ball defensive IQ player. This is the type of player where there's not enough flash for a lot of people to get excited about, but he's just good at basketball. And I think for OKC specifically, they already went with an upside pick earlier. At number 16, I think going here at 21 and taking a guy who's just flat out good, can just fit into a rotation. Hey, you need me for 15, 20 minutes tonight? Yeah, I can go play. I'll probably make a three-pointer or two. I'll get a steal or two, and I'll maybe get a weak side shot block as well. Karaban's just good, and he'd fill a multitude of different roles that I could see OKC valuing around their already extremely talented team. Pick number 22, the Golden State Warriors here now. At this spot in the draft, I think, upside is one that is a real question here for Golden State because, maybe Jonathan Kuminga could get traded. Brandon Podziemski's not having the best sophomore season ever by any stretch of the imagination either. So I think some Warriors fans are kind of not happy with the way that, they valued long-term direction, they valued upside, and maybe it's hurt their current championship window around Steph Curry. Now, they did win in 2022, so in some ways they are, kind of relinquished of that responsibility almost. But I'm sure some Warriors fans want to keep winning. I think this player is a kind of blend of both, where they can help them win games now a bit, but also long-term could be an interesting upside player. 22nd overall, I have them selecting wing Dink Pate from the G League, playing for the Mexico City Capitanes. He is an interesting player and one that I think would provide some real benefits to Golden State last mock draft, I mocked Pate to the Warriors as well. And in that one, I referenced Sean Livingston and how much of a backbreaker he felt like for opposing teams because of his mid-range shot making. That's the name of the game for Dink Pate. He's got tremendous footwork. He plays off of 2 feet really well. He understands that when he gets to advantage, defenders are going to have to get out of position to try and contest his shot, and he takes advantage of that. Good ball fakes, and he's got a mid-range scoring diet that I think would be beneficial to Golden State. Again, a lot of this mock draft, I talk about how, mid-range scoring is such an overlooked aspect of basketball because, we've been trained and told it's not an efficient shot. And in some ways, that's completely right. You don't want your half-court offense to be reliant on that kind of shot, but it doesn't mean having players who take that shot is a bad thing. And I think there's a real nuance between those two situations. Golden State, when you have Steph Curry, you're going to shoot a large number of threes. When you have Buddy Hield, you're going to shoot a large number of threes. Having someone who kind of differentiates your overall team shot diet and weaponizes other areas of the floor is always a good thing. Dink Pate's going to provide that to Golden State, and I think that's a real advantage that the Warriors really haven't had, honestly. Thinking back to the last time they had it was with Kevin Durant. So getting someone who can score in the mid-range area is going to be a benefit. Again, I'm not saying Dink Pate's Kevin Durant, okay? Obviously, 2 different levels of that. But Dink Pate might be able to knock down 1 or 2 mid-range shots a game, and I think that could be a really impactful 1 or 2 shots for a team like Golden State, who's, I still think, looking for a little bit more ball handling, a little bit more shot creation outside of Steph and Draymond. And I think Dink Pate could kind of bridge the future while also fitting next to Podziemski and the current iteration of Warriors basketball currently. Pick number 23, the Brooklyn Nets here now. This pick comes from the New York Knicks, part of the Mikal Bridges trade. And Brooklyn, who's already had an interesting draft, went with 2 Ratiopharm owned players in Ben Saraf and Noah Sengue. 23rd overall, I now have the Brooklyn Nets selecting forward Drake Powell from UNC. This is a big-time upside grab. One of the most athletic players in this class, and boy, does it show up in transition defense. He has had 2 unbelievable blocks this year. I'm talking 2 hand snatch blocks that are just unbelievable, stellar. This is the first time he shows up in one of my first round mock drafts. I know a lot of UNC fans specifically have been asking for him to be in here. I do think right now he is an advantage player, and we're going to talk about another UNC Tar Heel in a minute here too. Drake Powell, I think offensively is best suited playing in transition, playing once advantage is created for him. So for Brooklyn specifically, how does that really fit if they don't have a ton of advantage creators as it is right now? I think that's where the Ben Saraf pick is super important in this. Cam Thomas, his development as an offensive player obviously has been essential for that too. This is an upside grab though. This is an athleticism grab for Drake Powell, and as a player who I think can really impact the game defensively, I think that's where the upside really lies with him. For Brooklyn, I think the athletic traits, the tools there are what really spur a draft pick here in the first round for the Nets to take Drake Powell 23rd overall. Now at pick number 24, we have my Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks have had a pretty solid season to begin the year so far. I've been very happy with the way the team has looked and played. They have a lot of talent. They have a lot of tools. And obviously when you have Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, you're going to be a pretty good team, you'd have to assume anyway. So 24th overall now, the Dallas Mavericks here select guard/wing Ian Jackson from UNC. I told you we talk about the other Tar Heel in just a second here. Ian Jackson, another very athletic player. He's shooting the ball really well from 3 this season too. And just like I talked about with Drake Powell, this is another advantage player. This is a player who he's going to thrive in transition. He's going to thrive when opportunities are created by maybe mucking up the other team's offensive possession, getting out in transition and running. I think those are the traits that Ian Jackson could bring to Dallas, and I think that could be pretty complementary around Kyrie Irving, who has very active hands defensively, one of the most underrated elements of Kyrie's game, in my opinion. You also think about Quentin Grimes, the role that he's been playing for Dallas this year. I think Ian Jackson could kind of slide in, offer some of those similar traits, and that's been a real positive for the Mavericks this season, has been the role of Quentin Grimes and the play that he has provided for them. So I think Ian Jackson could be another upside get for them long-term, another guy who can muck up the game, utilize his athleticism, and if he continues to shoot the ball as well as he has all season, it's very possible we could see him as a legitimate first-round pick in the 2025 NBA draft. And I think Dallas fans would be very, very happy to walk away with this guy in the draft class this season. Pick number 25 here now, the Orlando Magic on the clock. Once again, remember, 17th overall went with Nolan Traore. Now at pick number 25, I have the Orlando Magic selecting wing LeBaron Philon from Alabama. This has been another huge riser in the draft process early this season. Now, he's not shooting the ball well at all from three, but this is an investment from Orlando on cutting opportunities and transition play and continuing to add to their defense. It just seems like LeBaron Philon continues to make winning plays. Every time he's out on the court, he's just doing something right. And listen, if the three-point shot doesn't start falling, that's going to be one of the big hinge questions for him going into the combine. How well does he shoot it in shooting drills? But right now, what I can tell you is teams are impressed with the way that he has been impacting, winning for the Crimson Tide, getting his hands on basketballs, cutting at the right times, playing in transition early and often. Those are things that have stood out to NBA scouts and NBA talent evaluators. And I think specifically for LeBaron Philon moving into the NBA, the name of the game for him is going to be impact, intensity, and effort. And those are things that he can control. Those are things that he has his hands on already doing at the college level. And if he does develop and grow as a shooter, again, this is a little bit of an investment pick here for Orlando. They don't have a ton of minutes to be handing out anyway into their rotation. It's about development. If they can send LeBaron Philon to the G League, have him play for Lakeland for a while, if he can grow as a shooter, again, this is a big if. This is a huge if for a ton of college prospects coming into the NBA. If they can grow to become respectable NBA shooters, they have a real chance to stick in the NBA, especially if they're willing to do a lot of the dirty work. LeBaron Philon's already doing some of the dirty work. He's already making winning plays right now for Alabama, showing a little bit of everything for the Crimson Tide. And I think for Orlando, that's the kind of investment they'd be willing to make long-term, especially with their intention just set on winning basketball games, something they do very, very well already. Pick number 26, the OKC Thunder here. Once again, their third pick in this first round. This one comes from the Houston Rockets, who I talked about earlier as a very impressive young team. Now, OKC continuing to add more talent. Again, you probably see why OKC is probably going to make a trade or two when it comes to these draft picks. Not only does Sam Presti already have a history of doing that on draft night, but 3 first-round picks for the current collection of talent they already have on the roster seems a little excessive. So I wouldn't be surprised if they trade these back or maybe package a couple of them to move up for a specific prospect. Nonetheless, though, 26 overall, the Oklahoma City Thunder here select wing Hugo Gonzalez from Spain, someone who in the ACB has not really played a ton. He just hasn't been given a ton of minutes, hasn't really earned that opportunity. When he's been on the court, he's flashed some of those skills, but hasn't been productive in them. I think he's shooting sub 20% from three this year in those limited minutes. He's just not been extremely productive or effective. But what I do know is this is a skill pickup here for Oklahoma City. And just like I've talked about multiple times in this mock draft already, skills trump production, especially when you're projecting what a player could potentially become in their career over the next 5 to 7 years. Hugo Gonzalez has solid positional size. He's wing-sized in the NBA. He's got the ability to handle the basketball a little bit in, U18 play and before. We've seen Hugo Gonzalez play make off of a live dribble, function as a scorer, a cutter, a shooter a little bit. Now, he hasn't had that season this year, which is why coming into the year, I think a lot of people were projecting him as a potential top 10 pick. He's now sliding to the back end of the first round, maybe even further than that. So, if Hugo Gonzalez ended up being a second round pick on draft night, I wouldn't be super shocked by that. 26th overall here, I think OKC is the type of team that could afford to take him, say, hey, we're not going to play him at all the first year of his career or whatever, and we'll just wait on him. We'll just see what he can become. We'll send him down to the blue. He can play G League minutes. People, especially, it's gotten better over the last 3-4 years, but when I used to say that specifically, people would take that as a criticism or that I'm, being mean to a prospect saying he's going to have to play G League basketball. Over half the NBA plays G League basketball now. Teams need the G League for developmental minutes. They need the G League for opportunities for players to expand and grow their game. And I think for Hugo Gonzalez specifically, 26th overall, he's going to be another example of that where he has to play minutes. He has to have opportunities in game to grow. And I think the G League is going to be able to provide him that opportunity unless something significant changes between now and the NBA draft in 2025. Pick number 27 here, the Memphis Grizzlies now on the clock with this pick. And the player I have mocked for them just feels like a Memphis Grizzly type selection. The Grizzlies have done such a good job finding talent in the draft, specifically second round, but also finding some first round talent too, to really round out their rotation and really have a lot of depth around their star nucleus. So even to the point where Desmond Bane is not playing great this year, the Grizzlies just keep winning games, and that's something that they consistently do, and they're going to find a talented player here as well. Out of Colorado State, 27th overall, I have the Memphis Grizzlies selecting Nick Clifford. The Colorado State Ram has been awesome this season. I think we've seen real development for the senior on the offensive end of the floor. He's shooting the ball really well from three so far this season. We've seen real expansion for his offensive skill set in terms of shooting more pull-up jump shots, being a little bit of a more go-to offensive player for Colorado. Now, in the NBA, he's not going to be asked to do those things. He's going to have to be primarily a spot-up guy, and what he's really going to bring to the table is defensive tenacity and defensive versatility. He's someone who can play all over the basketball court defensively. He has a lot of experience playing as a weak side help man for CSU. He also does a good job defending just flat out on the perimeter, navigating screens, staying attached to ball handlers, keeping his chest in front. That's one of the biggest things I always say throughout these draft processes. Can a guy KBIF, keep the ball in front of him? If he can keep the ball in front of him, he's a potential NBA draft defender, right? He can guard in the NBA if he's, stalwarting, stymieing drives. You don't want players who are just solely dependent on, highlight plays defensively, because those things are fewer and further between in the NBA level. And I think, Zion Williamson's a great testament to that too. Nick Clifford wins with technique. He wins with his actual ability to KBIF, keep ball in front. So for Memphis specifically here at 27, it just feels like a pick that fits them. Adding one more player into their treasure trove of wings makes sense around Jalen Wells and around G.G. Jackson, around Vince Williams Jr. This is a player that can play in the NBA, and I think Nick Clifford's going to fit the Grizzlies and the culture that they have set up there as well, offensively, and their team identity very, very well. Pick number 28, the Los Angeles Clippers here now in a pick swap with the Oklahoma City Thunder. As a result of the Paul George trade, here now the Clippers have an opportunity to add talent, and this is essential for them because I think the Clippers are such a very unique perspective in the NBA right now of how you can have a lot of talent and also a real talent deficit at the same time. The Clippers have a very, very good starting lineup even without Kawhi Leonard. Zubac has been awesome. Norman Powell's been great. Derek Jones Jr. has been really good for them. James Harden's still been playing at a very, very high level, even though the shooting splits don't really indicate that. I still think James Harden's been one of the better point guards in the entire NBA this season. And yet their team has a real talent deficit as well. They're playing Kevin Porter Jr. huge minutes. He's probably the worst high usage player in the entire NBA. So a team like the Clippers, they need to add more talent. They need to add players who can fit into their depth. Getting Kawhi Leonard back at some point will help this too, because it'll add, one extra player into their rotation. 28th overall, I have the Los Angeles Clippers selecting guard John Mobley Jr. from Ohio State. And about 10 games into the season here for the Buckeyes, Mobley shooting over 50% from three on pretty respectable volume, playing a pretty solid amount of minutes per game. The Buckeyes have probably the best shooter in college basketball right now. Him or Kobe Bryant, probably the two prime candidates for that. Obviously there's others you can throw into the ring too, but John Mobley Jr. has been so impressive shooting the ball this year. I've seen the Steph Curry comparisons thrown around. No one's ever going to be Steph Curry again. That's the old head in me saying that. I don't care if someone ever comes and shatters his records. No one's ever going to be Steph Curry for me, just like how you ask a 45-year-old if there's ever going to be another Michael Jordan, he's going to tell you no. John Mobley Jr. is not the next Steph Curry, okay? But he can really shoot the lights out of the basketball, and I think for the Clippers specifically, if you're looking to draft a player, someone who can handle the ball a bit as a guard, create for an offense, but also still fit around your other talent, it's got to be someone who can shoot. And John Mobley Jr. really does that. Now, there's other ways that this team could look. They could look for, some seniors. Mark Sears is a guy I've talked about in the past. As an example, there's other really high-qualified senior college basketball players right now that could step in and play minutes for the Clippers too. So it doesn't have to be a freshman like John Mobley Jr., but I do think the upside here makes some sense as well. His shooting gravity could really help around James Harden moving forward. So John Mobley Jr. is the pick here, 28th overall for the Clippers in this mock draft. At pick 29, I have the Boston Celtics taking Josan Sanin from Arizona State. The reasoning here, again, another high-volume three-point shooter, one of the better shooters in the entire college basketball ranks right now, and he's scoring at a very high clip too, averaging around 15, 16 points per game. Now, the issue, I think, with Sanin really stems from his playmaking ability. He's only averaging about 1 assist per game despite having the ball a good amount. A lot of his shots do come off of ball reversals, rotation. I think that's one of the reasons why I think he's such a good fit here with Boston specifically. Boston typically wins with ball movement. They're very Spurs-esque in the way that they play under Joe Mazzulla. I think that's one thing that just constantly gets overlooked. for Boston. People are very critical of Joe Mazzulla for some reason. I just don't understand it. Yes, the team's talented, but Joe Mazzulla is a tremendous coach, and it shows up in the way that the Celtics play as a team, not just as an individual isolation unit. They share the basketball. They play very good team ball. And I think Joe Sanson, specifically with the types of looks he's been scoring this year off of ball reversals, off of ball movement, off of manufactured opportunities, Sanson could fit in very, very well with Boston. It kind of reminds me of when they picked Aaron Nesmith a few years ago. I really like the Nesmith pick. Now, they didn't ultimately hold on to him, traded him for Brogdon in a deal with Indiana a few years later. But Sanson, I think, could fit really well with Boston. I think would be an interesting fit. And it's the first time in one of my first-round mock drafts. Obviously, I haven't recorded one for a month. But he's going to probably stay right in this first-round range for the foreseeable future at least. Pick number 30, the Utah Jazz here now with their final pick and the final pick in the first round overall. And the Jazz already drafted Ace Bailey. They drafted Boogie Fland. Now they have an opportunity to add one more talented player here in the first round via the Cavaliers. 30th overall, I have the Utah Jazz selecting center Rocco Zikarsky. So we went with wing, guard, and big man for Utah. And I when there's smoke, there's fire usually. And what I mean by that, all of the news and rumors and circulation around Walker Kessler potentially being traded leads me to believe at some point the Jazz will ultimately trade him. And if they do, finding another huge body rim protector in Rocco Zikarsky can make some sense. Now, I have had my criticisms of Zikarsky, even though I am very intrigued with him as a prospect because of his sheer size and the value of rim deterrence in the NBA. He plays relatively soft. I just don't know if he's going to be a true NBA caliber center on night one of his career. I don't even know if he'll be that 3 years into his career because he just sometimes shies away from contact. He doesn't have the best touch in the world either. The talent isn't there for him to be a post-up offensive player. I'm not sure if he's going to be the best screen setter either. So then offensively, you're wondering, okay, what exactly is his role? But the one thing we really know right now, he's big and he wants to block shots. And that's a really useful beginning template for a big man. If you're huge and you block shots, teams are going to be interested in you. And I could see Utah really sniffing around someone like Rocco Zikarsky. He's young. They probably view him as a guy, if they get him in, develop him. There are some tools to work with. Again, a lot of that stemming from his size, length, wingspan, athleticism, shot blocking timing. Those are the traits that are impressive. And if you believe you can either bulk him up, put some more muscle on him, and maybe just have him buy into playing a little bit more physically, this could be a really nice pickup for the Utah Jazz at the end of the first round in 2025. Really hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget about that brand new series on the channel, the Phoenix Suns NBA 2K25 franchise, where I rebuild Matt Ishbia's huge mess there in Phoenix. Thanks again, everyone, so much, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.